Hi there. Today we're going to be having a look at the bus seat booking exercise from the web page. This exercise uses StringGrids to represent the seat arrangement in some buses. Have a look at the web page. You'll find a form to represent the bus seat layout and an option to book by indicating column and row. In the exercise there is a link to the bus seat booking file. Please download that and extract it as I have done over here. This provides the source files we're going to be working with. Open project 1 and once it's open we'll have a look at the code. In the meantime I'm going to open the questions on the sidebar on the right just so we can refer to them while we carry on. As we start, we have a screen with 3 different buses, bus 1, bus 2 and bus 3, and by clicking on this we select the bus we're going to be working with. Let's begin with bus 1. We're going to need the usual file variables as we open this bus, so I'm going to create a connector of type text file, and we can do the standard little check, see if the file exists. If not, file exists, and this one is named bus 1. If you have a look at the source files, you'll see we've got bus 1, a small text file, bus 2 representing a larger bus, and then bus 3. So we're working with bus 1, bus1.txt. Then again, not going to show an error message in this case. I'm just going to exit the routine, and we can go about the business of loading our file. Assign file, connector, bus1.txt. If this wasn't a Windows system, we'd have to be careful about the correct capitalization and case of the file name. Being Windows, it doesn't really matter. Reset con while not EOF of con do begin read line con. And over here I'm going to have to create that line, sline string. And then we're going to do a variation on the pos copy delete business. For the first bus, this would look something like this. I don't necessarily have to use pos because I know each cell that I'm trying to read is just one particular character followed by a comma, so at most 2 characters. So I can work with StringGrid 1, cells, column and row. I'm going to have to create those variables. That's going to keep track of where I'm adding things. Equals copy from sline 1, 1. We're copying the first one, and I can do the same for the second one, so that will be 1, 2. This is going to, we're going to skip the comma, and I'm going to take from cell 3. I can only get around this one because I know the size of the data. Alright, let's create a column and row. I don't use column in this one. Integer r=1. I'm leaving the column headers as indicated in the picture in the questions. I haven't set up those column headers. We could name them to make it easier for people to reference this, but I'll leave them blank for now. It just means we're starting at row 1 and not row 0. The very top row is row 0. Inc R. And we'll also see the question requires you to resize the StringGrid appropriately. So let's just do that while we're at it. StringGrid 1.col count is going to be 4. The title column, the fixed rows, which do not get any values in our particular case right now, and then 1.row count, which is also going to be 1 more than the number of items I'm going to read. This bus, if you have a look at bus 1, has 3 seats across and 3 rows. It's a fairly small little bus. So this also will be 4. And there we go, we're done. Close file. That will load that particular file. I would now need to do the same for bus 2, which could be copying this entire procedure and just adjusting it slightly for the different count. But this leads us to an interesting proposition. I've got here 2 procedures, and if I look at my form, I'm going to have 3 procedures doing essentially the same thing. Loading information from a file. The layout of the file is the same, it's just the dimensions change slightly. Where you've got routines that are that similar, it should be possible to create a generic subroutine to manage that. And then it adjusts depending on the particular file size. In any case, maybe this organization sells one of the buses and buys a slightly larger bus. Now I have to adjust my entire program. It would make much more sense to have the procedure adjust itself automatically depending on the file size. So how can we adjust this routine to make it more generic? Well, let's begin by creating a procedure. Load bus file, and as it's one parameter, we're going to give it a file name. Shift-Control-C creates the function where we're going to work, and I am going to copy this because essentially we're going to be modifying our routine that we've created to try and make it a little bit more generic. Now the first thing is we've got a file name, so I'm not going to have the text anymore. I'm going to type file name, which is the name of our generic file. The second thing that has to change is I don't know the size of the string grid, so I cannot resize it to this specific size anymore. One of the buses may be bigger than that. And even if I use the largest bus as my starting point, we may buy a still larger bus at a later date. So I'm going to set a size which is fairly arbitrary, but larger than any of the values in any of the buses. You will see that bus 2, the biggest bus, only has 7 rows and 5 seats across. I could, of course, make that value much larger. Now, I don't know how many seats technically I'm going to have. One bus is 3, another bus is 4, one is 5. Maybe they buy a big bus that goes 7 rows across. We don't know. Maybe I wanted to book an aeroplane. So I'm going to have to make a more generic version of this routine. I can use pos because I know the comma separator, and continue doing this until no more commas are found. Now I have to keep track of the column as well as the row when I'm busy placing these values. I'll leave that there, but now I'm going to delete from S-line 1, 1. Sorry, we want to delete 2 characters because we need to delete the comma as well. And what's going to happen now is we're going to see if a comma still exists in the line, copy the character from the line into an appropriate column, delete that character and repeat the loop, checking to see if there's a comma left in that line. If it is, then we keep on cycling through this until we're out of commas. It means I'm going to have to make sure that I start on the first column in the grid that I'm going to work with, in the same way that I had to start on the first row. And I'm also going to increment my column count every time. Let me create C while I'm at it. These lines can now be deleted. The very last one that is deleted will leave the last seat in S-line, so I can copy this, remembering that C indicates the next available cell in the string grid. So this will be getting a value from S-line. Then we increment R and we can close the file. Left that bit out earlier. Alright, the last thing is now my C and my R indicate the number of rows and columns in the grid. So I can use that to set the grid to the correct size. This affects display. String grid 1 dot row count R. That indicates the number of rows, remembering always that there is the one fixed row that would be used for titles. I'm not setting that at the moment, but it is there. And we do count, and this will be C plus 1. I didn't increment after the last seat that I set. So with the fixed column, we have to add 1. And there we are. We have a generic routine based on my original Bus1 routine, which should be able to adjust for any bus size. If I'm worried, I can always increase these to a larger value, and any reasonable bus should be catered for. And I can call this routine load bus file from all of my buttons. I can now say load bus file. This one is bus1.txt. Having a procedure that does the job simplifies your programming enormously, because now each bus that I add, and if I purchase another bus and add a new button, it's just load bus file for that particular bus name. Spelling as always, and we can save this, and this is just a test. The program is not complete, but we can check there's bus 1, bus 2, bus 3, and we can compare that with what we have as our sample. Let's do bus 2 again. Remember, the spaces represent empty seats, the X's are booked seats, and so far so good. To book a seat, we're going to get seat values from those edit boxes. So I'm going to give myself some variables, an R and a C again for row and column. The row edit box is named edit 2. The column edit box is named edit 1. It would have been better to use more specific names, but we'll work with what's there. Test to see whether there is a value in that cell in the string grid. Column first. See if it contains a value. And this means that that cell or seat in this instance has been booked, so show a message. And if we get to this point, then we know that that seat is available, so we can set the seat value and show an appropriate message. And we can test. Oops, these ones need to be converted. They are string to int. Obviously, I'm not doing any testing at this point to do a proper version of this program. I should test to make sure that only valid integer data is entered. Maybe wrap this inside a try and accept block. At the moment, I'm going to assume that this is fine. Let's go book, and let's book the second seat. So column 2, row 1, book, and there we go. And let's see if column 2, row 2, book, that seat is already taken. Fine. So that's booking the seat. Let's add the delete option. Delete uses many of the same routines as booking. We're going to have to check a row and a column, and someone is going to have to be able to delete, so I'm going to copy most of that code. If the seat already has a value, then I'm going to set that to an empty value. And I don't have to do anything if I'm trying to delete an already empty value. We'll just fail gracefully, and there we go. So let's see if I can delete the entry in column 1, row 2, delete, and it's gone. So the only thing that remains now is to build our output string. I need to enable someone to save. This also means that I might have to make a record when I'm busy loading my bus file of what the current bus is, because when I save, I need to save to the correct bus name. So let me add a little private variable, bus name, which is a string. And whenever someone successfully loads a file, where is our load file? There we go. Just before we close it, I can say bus name is file name. That way I remember which bus we're working with, and when I save the file, we're saved to the correct file name. Save button. Just like when reading from the file, we're going to need a file variable. and we created the bus file variable to work with this. So bus name rewrite, because we're going to be building this from scratch. My string grid has that row count property, so I know how many lines I'm going to work with. I don't have to use a while loop, I can use a for loop. And I'll use R as the variable because we're working with rows. And it's going to be 1, 2, string grid 1 dot row count. Not -1 because we're only working with the values from 1 on. Again. And I need to build the line. Again, I know how many cells because we have that call count routine, but I need my line, S line equals a string. Sorry, that should not have the equals. So for C, we're going to use a C variable, 1, 2, string grid 1 dot call count do, and again the first column is blank, so I'm ignoring that one. Again, start by initializing the line, make sure it is blank. S line colon equals S line plus, and we're going to add string grid 1 cells, and this will be C, comma R. I need to add a comma separator, and it would be appropriate to have that at the end of the previous line and before the next cell. That way I'm always ending on a cell without a comma at the end of it. But this does mean I have to start with a cell that doesn't have a comma in front. I'm going to add, instead of that, I'm going to have this start off with an initial value of column 1, and I'm going to make this for loop start at cell 2 just to make sure that we build our line correctly. Every bus has at least 1 seat per row. And there we go. I've constructed my line. I now need to write it. Write line con, comma, S line. And when we're done, close file. And that's essentially it. Build your string, write the line, close the file. So save and let's test. We're going to work with bus 1. I'm going to add a booking at column 2, row 2, book. Let's book another one, column 1, row 2, book. Okay, that one's taken. Let's make column 2, row, book. We've booked our seats. At the moment, bus 1 looks like this. There's only the one seat booked. Let's see what happens when we save. Save. Nothing visible. I forgot to include some sort of feedback. But now we go to bus 1, and there we are. The 2 seats that have been booked. You'll notice that it has added 1 extra row. And that means row count should have been 1 less than the row, and col count should have been 1 less, to make sure that I stop at the correct column. Let's run this again and check bus 1. Let's add something to row 1, column 1, book, and yes, let's delete the one in row 2. And see after we've saved what changes were made. And there we are. All looks fine. So, I do hope you had fun with that one. See you again next time. Bye for now.